Welcome to SCC Online. I am Shreya Tiwal, Student Ambassador of EBC and SCC Online. Currently, I am pursuing law from Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies. The healthcare sector is at the epicenter of this unprecedented global pandemic challenge. It's been said that the healthcare sector has immense potential to be the country's next sunrise sector, and the country can be savior of our part of the world amidst this COVID crisis. In view of the present situation, today we have invited our guests to have their insights into the legal and regulatory framework that govern this sector and to know about the problems and challenges that are being faced by the healthcare and pharmaceutical industries. Our guests for today are Advocate on Record Mr. Aditya Jain and Advocate Ms. Neha Gyamlani. Sir and ma'am are the founding partners of J&G Advocates. J&G Advocates is a dispute resolution boutique law firm which specializes in commercial litigation, e-commerce laws, healthcare and pharmaceutical laws, maritime law. Welcome, sir. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Let's start with the interview. So, my first question to you would be the COVID 19 crisis is surely one of its kind and has no precedent to it. There are no rule books, no standards that tell the government what to do, how to how to restart the economies, how to have an exit strategy from this problem. So, in the present times, what are the problems that our healthcare sector is and what are the most important innovations that would be required to be adopted by this industry to battle against this pandemic?
Yes. So the major challenges which are being faced by our healthcare system today are, firstly, we can relate it with the 5 A's which are harming the sector or which are lacking in the industries. First one is awareness. So awareness in the section, especially in the rural section of the population, uh, is lacking somewhere. Second A is access. Access to healthcare means the overall access to healthcare by all the sections of the society. It's not just about one section of the society of the middle and the high class. When the public sector is not able to provide it to the rural problem, so there's lack of access of healthcare in the country, which is prevailing. Third is absence of the human power crisis. Absence of the human power crisis means that there are lack of resources in terms of the public and the private healthcare in the private healthcare sector, which is not being managed by both the sectors appropriately to address the needs of all the sections of the society. Fourth, and the very important is affordability or the cost of healthcare and the fifth A is the accountability. Besides these sectors, some of the major problems are that we have to, in India particularly, we have to reduce the out-of-pocket expenditure which is being spent by the public onto the healthcare. So the pocket doesn't allow so much of healthcare expenditure for them, be in terms of the medical insurance or be in terms of the over-the-counter medicines which is not being affordably provided to them. Fourth, the big challenge which is again coming in the industry is that India has not been able to recognize the manpower or the skills of the people who are into this sector. These are the major challenges which we have to overcome to usher into a new age of the healthcare, which is called as a digital healthcare or the e-healthcare. So until and unless we can address these problems, there would be problems again in the next sector and the next phase. Okay. The innovations simultaneously with these challenges, some innovations have come into the healthcare sector, which Aditya will guide you about now.
There are some innovations which have come into the picture, especially during the COVID-19 phase. And I think we need to adopt disruptive technologies like AI, robotics, IoT, healthcare aggregators, and to deliver top-class medical facilities. As we all know, India faces an shortage of doctors and qualified medical professionals and good medical hospitals as well, especially in the public health infrastructure. Hence, we need to leverage these technologies to make sure that these technologies could at least be used for basic things like, physician treatment, diagnostics, X-rays, etc. Where actual doctor physical meeting is not required. Now, there are some states who have actually adopted these technologies to deliver healthcare. Of course, Rajasthan has a policy called Rajasthan Bhamasha Swasth Bima Yojana, RBSBY, which is one of the most successful healthcare insurance programs, and where the insurer gets rupees 30,000 for general illness and rupees 3 lakhs for critical illness. This program has achieved a lot of success because of its efficacy in implementation by the state government. Now, this program was introduced a few years back, and it has also been replicated by various states. Similarly, the state of Andhra Pradesh has a program called Chandrana Sanchara Chikitsa, a flagship program where medical care is provided on wheels. It ensures availability of accessibility of medical services to the needy and remote villages. With the help of 289 vehicles, people are catered the best medical facilities. This was done under the Chandrababu Naidu government, and this has now been followed by the new government as well. And this has been a very successful program. Another state program which was adopted by the Andhra Pradesh government was Mukhyamantri Arogya Kendralu, which is also the state of art healthcare is provided to slum dwellers and the urban poor. There's also the NTR Vaidya Pariksha program for laboratory services, where state governments provides free diagnostic tests to patients visiting government hospitals. Madhya Pradesh also has Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel free drug distribution yojana, which is being implemented in various cities of Madhya Pradesh and also the villages. Similarly, innovations in the cardiology space, radiology, and imaging space are already seen and being adopted by the several states. Now, one thing which I would like to point out was the use of telemedicine in the innovation space, medical innovation space. Now, what I can think of at this stage is the Agra model of Seva Kendra, I think it's called, where they have a separate cell which is providing telemedicine services to the poor and the needy in the healthcare space. So this has achieved a lot of success. Similarly, diagnostics and cancer care, initial cancer care, could be provided by using telemedicine space. And but what we need to make sure is while we use technology for these things, we need to make sure that the information that is given is critical patient information, and that needs to be safeguarded. So these all are the things which are being used and which could be adopted, which similar models could be adopted by different states to make sure that we overcome this corona crisis, especially in face of a poor public infrastructure that India has.
Very true, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am, for your answer. The effective policy intervention with regard to the 5 A's that Neha ma'am mentioned, and the effective policy implementation with regard to the schemes that Aditya sir just mentioned will surely streamline the process and would help to provide quality access care. Now, sir, you spoke about telemedicine. So, coming to that, the telemedicine practice guidelines 2020 were introduced amidst this corona crisis only to cater to the urgent needs of the present time. What, according to you both, is the significance of the same, and are there any loopholes in the same?
See, there are two parts to it, as you rightly mentioned. The significance of the guidelines and the loopholes of the guidelines. While I'll be focusing on the significance part of it, Neha will throw some light on the loopholes that are there in the guidelines, which we need to cure. Now, coming on to the significance part of it, I think the telemedicine guidelines of 2020, March 25th, 2020, are really significant because for the first time, our policymakers have provided some kind of regulatory infrastructure for telemedicine to thrive upon. Now, what we were seeing was that there was telemedicine, telemedicine consultation sessions which were going on in several cities, but there were no guidelines to this effect. Now, with the arrival of these guidelines, where we are is at a stage where we can make sure that seamless telemedicine consultation sessions are going on across the length and breadth of the country. Now, uh, what does the guideline means for the patient? The patients now, even at a remote village, could avail the services of a good medical practitioner by way of telemedicine sessions. The guidelines, as such, have provided certain norms which will make sure that the data which is there during the session is kept safely and securely. Now, the guidelines cast a duty on the doctor and the telemedicine consultant, and also on the intermediary, to make sure that the data is not leaked. There are strict conditions which are laid down in the guidelines, and also the prescription part of it. Now, since the guidelines say that prescription could either be by way of an email, and express patient consent is required, and even doctor consent is required before beginning a telemedicine session. So these all procedural safeguards are there to make sure that telemedicine is conducted in a seamless environment. Secondly, informed consent is one another material aspect of these guidelines, where a patient is informed of the implications which would be there. Now, I think telemedicine should be used only for the first and the follow-up care. It should not be used for some typical or technical kind of surgeries, or where actually it is required to meet a doctor. So it is good for the initial and the follow-up care, though it is not very healthy for the post care. Now, Neha would be telling you more about the loopholes that are there in the guidelines.
Yes, Shreya, before talking about the loopholes, we should understand the very basic features and the salient features of these telemedicine guidelines, which includes that doctor can choose any medium of telecommunication or teleconsultation, which includes the emails, the WhatsApp, and all these kind of instant messaging services. So the first loophole we need to see here is that in this feature itself, that when they are saying that doctor can use any mode of telecommunication, and these telecommunication methods, they are encrypted or they can be coded or decoded, so there is no such information this in these telemedicine guidelines with respect to the data privacy issues firstly. So this is the foremost concern of the patients now, and even the doctors, that who will be concerned of how this the trail will be regulated. So when we are going in a telemedicine, when we are going in a teleconsultation, suppose I am going to a doctor with some disease of mine where I want to be confidential about it. But my biggest concern is that I'm leaving a trail of my disease. So how could that be regulated? How could that be secured from the eyes of the public and later from the eyes of the government? Because these kind of apps, instant messaging services, these are very well in the eyes of public. Google is not safe. We all know that. Second thing is that the guideline, which is a significance basically, is that doctor has to maintain the same standard of care during teleconsultation as he is doing during the in-house in-person consultation. But the guidelines never tell us that how are we regulating this. They has not picked any standards. They are saying the term they have used in the guidelines is the professional judgment of the doctor. Now, how this professional judgment of the doctor is guided, nobody knows. So they say that MCI, the Medical Council of India Act, will regulate it. But Medical Council of India at the same time hasn't amended the definitions of the professional judgment there in the act itself. So this is the second major loophole. Third is the guidelines say that the patient is responsible for the accuracy of the information. Now, this is a very generic statement to say that patient is responsible for the accuracy of the information. Now, you're the patient who is through the online medium that cannot understand the nuances of this kind of transaction which is happening online and not. So, accuracy of the information. Okay, the accuracy of the patient biometric information is definitely the responsibility of the patient himself. But what about the prescription? What about the standard of the care which is coming from the other side? So who is responsible for that? Now, surely the doctor won't take the responsibility of the professional judgment there. So these are some of the loopholes. Some things I would like to worldwide. There are some concerns with respect to the e-health and the medical health. These are firstly the money. Money means that how the cost of telemedicine or how the cost of e-health will be regulated. The people concerned fear that in-person consultation is very basic at cost, and there also we are facing such kind of high out-of-pocket expenditures. Now, e-health would again be very expensive. The e-health means the doctor has to enroll to a online forum. So, of course, the extra cost will be inculcated, and it will be the responsibility of the patient itself to be thrown on the patient's pocket again. So, the money is the major concern. Now, adoption in the technology is not defined that patients have to use a single technological model. They have said that such there would be a platform that they would be, right, as of now there are hundreds of platforms available on the internet where doctors can register themselves as a registered medical practitioner, the teleconsultation will start. Now, all these online platforms, are they registered with a single source entity who will take care of the data issues, who will take care of the medical trails and the medical records, where all of this would be stored? That is again a concern. And the last but not the least is the success of telemedicine. So India has to come up with some kind of success models to for better adoption and the better adaptation of telemedicine in the industry. These are the major loopholes I would have liked to.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am, for the answer. So, ma'am, you mentioned that the foremost concern that telemedicine brings to the forefront is the concern of data privacy. So, with everything going digital and with the advent of telemedicine as well, there is an increasing need of a legislation that would regulate the healthcare data privacy. While at present, India lacks a regulatory framework with regard to the same, but at the same time, the Personal Data Protection Bill and the DISHA are in pipeline. So, according to you, will they be able to provide an effective framework regulating the healthcare data?
Yes. As of now, healthcare data protection law in India is under progress, and everyone knows that we don't have a defined healthcare data protection bill. We came up with the PDP, and there are some other guidelines also, for example, DISHA, to guide the data which is existing in the healthcare infrastructure. So we know that we have a very growing healthcare market, and some new technologies are coming up, some more healthcare staffing is increasing, the health records are being maintained, e-health records are being maintained. We have come up with the telemedicine practices for the doctors. So all this is, of course, generating more and more data into the healthcare. But we don't know that how this data is processed, how this data is stored, and how this data is kept safe for both the doctors as well as for the patients. So, with respect to that, the Healthcare Data Protection Bill is very mandatory in India now. Now, what happened was that Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, they placed the draft of DISHA, which is the Digital Information Security in the Healthcare Act. Simply means that whatever data is being dealt into digital space, so how to store that data and how to keep that data with a secure environment. So this was the basic objective of the DISHA, which Aditya will focus on into. I will focus on that how, as of now, the health data is regulated in India. So there are some points I would like to tell to you all, that as of now, the data security and the privacy, this is the responsibility of the entity which holds the data. This is not the responsibility of the patients. This is the responsibility of the hospitals. In case any data breach happens, the entity could be penalized for the same in the IPC and according to the Information Technology Act. But in India, as of now, we don't have any system where, for example, the banking frauds. Now, whenever the banking frauds happen, the bank concerned has to report it to the RBI, Reserve Bank of India, the Apex Bank. But in our industry right now in the healthcare system, no such kind of this kind of process is available, that a small entity has to conform to the bigger entity. Although all these establishments are registered under the Clinical Registration Act and Clinical Establishments Act, but there is no such kind of a apex security organization which will take care of the security policy of the healthcare entity. So, but there are Indian Medical Council regulations 2002. They say that physicians must maintain confidentiality relating to individual or any domestic life that is entrusted by patients during various stages of their medical attendance and the procedures. But this according to these medical regulations 2002, nothing is being followed in India as of now. Uh, if we delve deeper into the kind of data approach which is being taken by the various entities, I would point out that there are 5 to 6 sectors which are storing data and which are keeping the data, and which is the data concern. Now, the pharma manufacturers, the pharma suppliers, and the pharmacies are also holding the data with respect to the data analytics they're doing with respect to the drugs and the medical devices, which is under threat of the foreign cyber attack or the cyber threat. The providers of the healthcare, which are the hospitals, healthcare centers, specialist centers, Ayush centers, diagnostic labs, they are holding our data. Technology vendors and suppliers are holding our data. Government is holding the largest data in the Indian government is holding the largest data because of the population. The biggest the size of the population, the biggest the data we are holding in the healthcare. And the payers. Payers means the medical insurance entities which are holding the data. Now these 5 to 6 entities which are holding the data is not secure. They don't have any organization which they have to report. Everyone is holding data in their database and which is under threat. So we have to come up now urgently with some kind of regulation in the healthcare data protection itself. We cannot be surviving on the data protection which is generic in the country. We cannot be guided by the data protection guidelines which are evolving in the other sectors. We have to come up with some kind of healthcare data protection bill now.
So now, going on to the latter part of it, there are two initiatives there, which are in the pipeline, which are not yet implemented. One is Disha and one is the PDP bill. As we all know, the PDP bill has been pending for long, and the government plans to introduce it in this session of the parliament. Now, the PDP bill has three concepts of a data intermediary, data principal, and a data fiduciary. So it assigns duties to each one of them. And in this particular case, in coming on to the healthcare sector, the hospital would be the data principal, and there are strong stringent liabilities which are levied on the data principal in case the data is breached. Similarly, if it's a teleconsultation session, then the platform through which the session is being conducted would be a data intermediary, and the data fiduciary would be the person whose data is being given. In that case, the data fiduciary would be the doctor, the data principal would be the patient, and the data intermediary would be the platform. Now, in this, since the PDP bill is not yet come into force, what is the current legal infrastructure for data protection in the healthcare sector? Surprisingly, there is none. The IT Act is rendered toothless because the provisions of the IT Act are in itself very difficult to enforce. Secondly, it does not provide sufficient mechanisms to prevent breach of data. There are provisions which impose certain criminal and civil liability on data breach, but how far they're being enforced is yet to see, because it does not specifically define the roles and responsibility of a data intermediary, data principal, and a data fiduciary. Similarly, the Disha initiative which the government plans to set up has two parts of it. Under the Disha initiative, there will be national electronic health authorities, which would be NEHA, and there would be state electronic health authorities, which would be SEHA, which would provide uh, extensive data protection to Indian subjects, such as, and also govern the data portability. Now, Disha mostly prevents healthcare providers from sharing any piece of sensitive information. Also, it sets up digital authorities at both state and national level, and it enforces privacy and security measures for electronic health data. But again, even the Disha initiative has not yet been enforced. Now, in foreign jurisdictions where there are robust data protection laws, healthcare through e-healthcare is not a problem. But in India, in the absence of a robust e-healthcare mechanism, even even the introduction of the telemedicine guidelines would be rendered toothless. So first, we have to go back now. We have to first introduce the data protection law, the Disha initiative, and then we should have come up with a telemedicine guideline. But as it always happens, we first go to B and then we come to A. So that is what has happened in this case as well.
Very true. The problem of healthcare data privacy is very concerning, and the government must implement or pass the required laws. So, Albert Einstein said that the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. The pandemic situation has caused the world to change its ways and to switch to digital platforms. In view of the present time, how should India shape the digital regulatory healthcare landscape in these pressing times and in midst of a global crisis? Because that is what would drive the healthcare sector further.
Yes. Not just due to the COVID-19, Indian healthcare services have already started becoming increasingly very tech-enabled, as we all know. That now digital health, because the digital health has a potential to expand across the diagnostics, the laboratories, the drugs, the medical insurance, point of care among the others, and now the telemedicine. So, of course, the industry was already becoming the tech-enabled. The foremost thing we have to remember, the policy has to change is that as it is tech enabled, we have to provide the incubation and the investment possibilities in the sector now. Now, the global problem here is it's a problem globally. In fact, even in the US and the Israel and in the many countries where the healthcare is very important, is considered very important, and there the healthcare policies which are utmost important for the government. One thing which is lacking there is the tech-enabled incubation services to these health startups and health tech startups and all. So, of course, when these countries are lacking, so India is very far behind in all these sectors. Now, what is happening is that some kind of health tech wants to do some data. They want to have basically streamline. They want to streamline the operations. They want to come up with a streamlined hospital setup or hospital information utility setup. So then they're not able to start up because of the funding issue. Now these are the sectors basically where we can go digital sectors. We have to go like we have to make some kind of the cloud based hospital information management system. Okay, then we have to make some cloud based insurance system, the insurance delivery system. Now all these facilities can be digitalized, but they haven't been able to digitalize yet in India. Okay, so these are the several phase problems which India is facing. Okay, I think Aditya will more guide you on this more on the
Yeah,
digital
I
management.
think the answer to this question has already been answered by me in the last question. Because what is the status of the current digital health regulatory landscape? The status is that we have introduced the telemedicine guidelines. We have the Disha, which is there. There are state governments which have adopted certain telemedicine infrastructure. But what we lack is PDP and a sufficient data protection law, and also authorities. I think the implementation of a law is also important. So, are the authorities equipped to deal with to implement the provisions of the existing laws? The answer is no, because as we see, even in cyber offenses, the police stations, the cybercrime cells are understaffed, ill-equipped, and they have very less knowledge how to trace a particular cybercrime. So I think first of all we need to train. We need to train. We need to inculcate. We need to involve. We need to hire individuals who are working in the digital and tech infra space for a lot of time, and they have certain amount of experience and expertise in the sector. Secondly, we need to make sure that we adopt a robust mechanism by taking into picture the stakeholder participation, because the stakeholders really know, the industry experts really know as to what are the problems that they face on daily basis. So the parliament should make sure that stakeholder participation is there before framing any law, because these are sectors which require huge amount of technical expertise. So I think stakeholder participation is very important.
There's some other several measures also which are required on an urgent footing, and the foremost among them is we have to create a robust IP mechanism for the healthcare in the healthcare sector. So we have to make some favorable IP laws for the drugs, the pharmaceuticals, and especially the biotechnology, because there we have to grant such kind of favorable IP to the stakeholders. Then one more thing is that we have to invest more in the R&D, research and development, and the innovation because India has to come up. India is launching many kind of biotechnologies in this process. For example, in the sake of the medical technology, India is one of the biggest manufacturers of the vaccines. There we are, but why aren't these being able to register, and finally why they have not been able to market themselves is because of the lack in the R&D and the innovation, and then again lack of the favorable IP laws in our country. These two things are also majorly connected with the digital healthcare ecosystem in our country.
Yes.
Very true. So the need for India to shape the digital regulatory framework is number one. Obviously, the data privacy. Then the India should put in more investment in R&D and the IP and the IT laws. So there is a recent trend. So recently, the Madras High Court has ordered Dr. Ramdev Patanjali to stop using the coronal branding that they came up with for their immunity boosting products in a trademark infringement suit that was filed against us. In that only, the Baba Ramdev's firm was slammed for exploiting the public fear and was also slapped with a rupees 10 lakh fine and penalty. Also, back in time, sometime recently, Coronel was in the news for not obtaining the license of Ayush and for not intimating the ministry. So, in the time of this pandemic, when all the pharmaceutical industries and the healthcare sector is collectively coming up with drugs and the vaccines so as to cure the problem that we have in hand, that is COVID-19, what are some of the things as with regard to the legality that the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare sector needs to be mindful of before they introduce their drugs or vaccines or discovery or intellectual property?
I think again, so the question has two parts to it. So I will be talking about the factual aspects of the case and what was the finding which was given by the court, and Neha would be throwing some light upon what should the pharma companies keep in mind with regard to licensing, patent, trademark, and compliances before introducing a drug or a vaccine. Now, what happened in this case was you need to understand one thing, that the plaintiff who filed the suit, the Madras High Court, he was the registered proprietor of two marks. One was Coronel 92B and one was Coronel 213 SPL under class 1 of the industrial chemicals. Now, the defendant launched, that is the Patanjali Ayurveda, launched the much wanted Coronel for curing coronavirus. And but in the face of battery of complaints, including one from the Ayush Ministry, they stated that no, it won't cure coronavirus, but it is a mere immunity booster. The plaintiff filed a suit against the defendant and sued him for relying on Section 29(4), stating that it had a reputation in India and abroad. Now, Coronel 92B and 213 SPL had a reputation, existing reputation in India and abroad. It also took a very interesting argument that the use of the mark by the defendant would dilute the plaintiff's reputation due to the perceived inefficacy of the product and the accompanying negative press of the defendant. The defense was predictably on the grounds of products being wholly different and there being no possibility of confusion. So Baba Ramdev's Patanjali Ayurveda, they contended that there was the products were totally different, since Coronel 92B and 213 SPL was majorly for floor cleaning and so on and so forth, and it was an industrial chemical registered under class 1, whereas the Patanjali Ayurveda was registered under class 4. So the purpose was totally different, hence it did not violate the infringement of the plaintiff. Now, interestingly, there were two things which were relied upon by the court, two sections of the patent trademarks act which were discussed. One was the 29(1) and one was 29(4). Now, 29(1) of the Trademarks Act is when an identical mark is used for similar class of goods which are similar to the same class, for which the registration has been effected. Whereas 29 subclause 4 of the Trademarks Act, protection is granted even when the offending mark is used for a different class of goods. The precondition for 29(4) is that the plaintiff's mark should have a reputation in India. So in this case, the court observed that the plaintiff's mark had already had a reputation in India. And reputation does not mean that it should be a very well-known mark. Reputation should mean that their overall conduct after introducing the said product in the market. So that would amount to reputation. So the court held that it was a well-known mark. It had a reputation in India. And though the Patanjali product was from a different class, still it amounted to trademark violation and it heavily penalized the defendant in this case. So it is an interesting judgment given by the Madras High Court, wherein the court has held that even the penalty which was imposed was quite heavy, and for different class of goods, even for different class of goods, if there's a particular reputation and there's harm to that reputation by introducing a particular product, then that defendant is liable to be penalized. Now, in this particular case, the court also took note of the fact that the defendant's image in the market is very ineffective and not good. The court specifically held that because the defendant's earlier conduct was with regard to was because the defendant had earlier said that it would be a corona curer, but it was not the same. Then it said it went back to its position and said that it would be used as an immunity booster. So court noted the conduct of the defendant also in this particular case and held the defendant liable. I think it's a good judgment. It actually goes leaps and bounds, and it has taken a lot of judgments of the UK and US courts also in mind for imposing a penalty on the defendant. I think upon what is the compliance part of it, the licensing part of it, and the which are required by the corporates before they introduce a particular product in the market. I think Neha would be able to throw some light upon this.
Yes, so Shreya, your question is very specific that uh, when the pharma companies are trying to come up with vaccine and the cure for COVID, so how they have to be, what they have to be mindful of the legal provisions when they're coming up with the drug and the vaccine. So I would like to tell you all that firstly that a vaccine is basically a drug because it is a preventive drug which is for the immunization purposes. So the vaccine, we India has a national vaccine policy, and telling you certain facts that India is one of the largest manufacturers of the vaccine in the world. We have a like $100 billion industry of vaccine production, where mostly the vaccines are marketed outside also. 2014, we all know that India, as it is known in the worldwide, that India became polio free. So this was the whole long 20-30 years of the vaccine immunization program. So in terms of vaccine production, India is doing really very fine. But the major loopholes are in the regulation of the vaccine. So let me tell you some of the vaccine regulations. Vaccine is regulated by the National Regulatory Authority under the Immunization and the Vaccine Program of India. So this is the regulatory or the apex authority, we can call it as. And the Drugs and the Cosmetics Act, because it is a drug, so it is regulated under Drugs and Cosmetics Act. Now, before a vaccine is finally marketed into, there are many kind of procedural and the production regulations which we have to oversee, and the first of them is the clinical trial oversight. That when the product is being it is when it is in the R&D stage, we have to they try the vaccines onto some animals, then comes the human trial of the vaccine. So these are all part of the clinical trials which are regulated in India also and worldwide, and we have to comply. Indian regulations have to comply with the WHO regulations also in this scenario. Second is the marketing authorization, which Aditya was also talking about it, and the marketing authorization and the IP laws, which a manufacturer has to take into consideration before bringing his vaccine into the market. Then come the vigilance. Vigilance also is at the time of the production and the manufacturing only. Laboratory access are where the vaccine is being produced. The laboratory access is given to certain organizations. For example, the CDSCO, the Central Drug Standard Control Organization, where they have to oversee that in what environment and in what kind of laboratories the manufacturing is going on. And so these are very standard guidelines when vaccines are being produced, and these are just handful. There are other number of things. For example, the licensing of the premises where the manufacturing of vaccine is being done, that is also done separately. Then there's some market surveillance and the control. Here the analytics come into form, that initially what trial we have to do and what disease it will be, what prevention disease it will have to take into picture. For example, अभी COVID-19 का ड्रग लाइसेंसिंग चलता है, अभी COVID-19 का सबसे पहले मार्केट सर्वेलेंस हो रहा है कि हाउ टू टारगेट इट, किस किस को टारगेट करेगा, कितने लोगों के लिए वैक्सीन बनेगी. तो मास वैक्सीन इनिशियली वैक्सीन का जो ट्रायल होता है और उसका जो प्रोडक्शन होता है, दैट इज just for like a handful of people, just lakhs of people. Then comes the mass production after the human trials are concluded and their efficacy is proven. Then there's some regulatory inspection, and lastly the quality control inspection. And the quality control inspection is that after the human trial, they see that whether efficacy is proved or not. Then only they can start their mass production. So all these regulations are being taken care of before finally a vaccine is actually marketed, and it is started. इसका mass production एक country में start होता है. So as of now, no mass production has started worldwide for the COVID-19. This is one major fact which needs to be told to people. They think that वैक्सीन बन रही है, वैक्सीन बन रही है. नहीं, अभी तक किसी वैक्सीन का मास प्रोडक्शन स्टार्ट नहीं हुआ है. इंडिया में भी ओनली ह्यूमन ट्रायल्स आर गोइंग ऑन फॉर द COVID-19 वैक्सीन.
Very true. So, as mentioned, the Madras High Court judgment was a very welcoming judgment. Even the court in the judgment said that a simple check or with the trademark registry would have intimated the defendants that there was already a trademark in place. So, when they're exploiting the panic and fear among the people, when the pharmaceutical and healthcare sector is doing so, so they need to be need to be penalized, so they do not take these steps. So referring to there needs to be stringent regulatory framework on that, and there are no second guesses there. So my next question with you would be with regard to the another aspect that comes within the healthcare industry, that are the medical devices. So there have been certain failures and inefficacies in the same in the present times. There have been controversies. So medical devices do form a quintessential aspect of the healthcare industry. Do you think that the present regulatory framework is effective, or it needs an overhauling in view of the circumstances that comes up day and again in front of us?
Yes. So, looking into the history that how these medical devices came into the picture, and recently there has been a new law for the medical devices, which has been announced in January or February 2020 only. So, what happened was initially under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, both the drugs and the medical devices were being regulated simultaneously. Now, what was the ill effect of this was the drugs were more, medical devices are less, as we can obviously think about it. Now, what happened was there were only handful of medical devices the which could be regulated or which could be controlled under this Drugs and Cosmetics Act. The new medical devices which were coming into the picture due to the newer technologies and newer diagnostic technologies or imaging technologies coming up, they were not being able to come into the picture of the Drugs and Cosmetics Act because nobody knew that how to control them, how to prove their efficacy, because these were not being manufactured by India. The problem came here because these were just being imported. So there comes that in 2017, the government came up with the Medical Devices Act. So it was not an act; it was a medical device regulations which came into attached with the Drugs and Cosmetics Act itself. Now there what happened is that from around 15 devices which were regulated before in the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, from 50 it led to 30, then it came to 40. But again there was a need felt that how to tell, see, medical devices, we have to see two, 4 to 5 things which are very important is that we have to see that how these medical devices are being manufactured, where these are manufactured, so to who has to prove the efficacy of the medical device. We have to see for the patient safety also in this. So efficacy of medical device is the foremost problem. Then came the quality control. If we are importing these devices and if they are being sold into the Indian market, the the regulation and the quality controlling power comes into the hands of the Indian suppliers. So can we control the quality of the imported medical devices? Third thing which came up was, what if the medical devices which are being produced or imported, they become faulty? Then whose fault it is? The manufacturer's fault or the device fault? Then came up with the additional issues which were like the labeling and the packaging issues of the medical devices. And there was many sort of medical devices controversy which came into the Indian market. For example, the stents, the pricing of the stents was a major issue. There were some coronary stents which were faulty and still they were being impacted or they were being inserted into the human bodies. Then the Johnson and Johnson hip implants, and there were etc. many kind of medical device controversy which have come into the market. So for all these, the government felt that there is a need to separate the regulation and the control of drugs from the devices, and that's why now they have come up with the medical devices rules in 2017. What these rules are doing is that they are classifying the devices according to the risk. The A, B, C, D are the 4 categories where they've divided the medical devices according to the risk allocation. Now, whatever risk which the A device hold, the B device has a lesser risk, C device has a more lesser risk, and D are the devices which don't have such risk. So there are separate regulations and separate quality control procedures for all these kind of devices.
So I think to going forth and where Neha left, I think the Medical Devices Amendment Rules 2020, they say that registration of medical devices is mandatory. So the manufacturer and importer of medical devices has to compulsorily register the medical device with the Drug Controller General of India through an online portal called Online System for Medical Devices, established by the CDSCO, that is Central Drug Standard Control Organization. So this is a welcome change. Now, the 37 categories of medical devices which are specified in the 8th schedule of the MDR 2017 will not be affected by this amendment, and therefore will not have to require a registration. But the new medical devices which are being floated in the market, which are being imported or which are being manufactured, their registration would be mandatory. Similarly, now moving forth, what we need to do, that is another important question, that how far we have traveled and how far we need to go. So what we need to do is we have to assign the roles and responsibilities of each authority very clearly at each stage, and make sure that technically and qualified scientists are there at each stage of licensing. Because what happens is the currently manning of such technical departments such as the Technical Advisory Board or the CEDESCO or the NPPA, these departments are being manned by individuals who at some level are not qualified to deal with technical questions or these technical queries. And as a matter of fact, we see that there is a case of faulty implants, and there is a case where spurious devices are being imported from China. Now, how do we overcome that? We need to overcome that by making sure that there are checks and balances at each level of trial. There are checks and balances at each level of manufacturing or be it importing. Secondly, we also need to make sure that the departments, the infrastructure that we have, the NLEM, that is the National List of Essential Medicines, that is made more comprehensive. Subsequent to a judgment passed by the Delhi High Court in Virendra Sangwan's case, coronary stents were included in NLEM, and that was a welcome change. That was a very huge leap, in which a court finally had to intervene because the departments were not taking action, were not really concerned about including these necessary devices in NLEM. So that was a welcome change. Similarly, the Madras High Court judgment recently, in which it penalized Patanjali. So I think these such judgments, such judicial intervention is required from time to time to make sure that even the medical devices sector or the drug sector is kept in check.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am, for the answer. So very true, the preventive and promotive health, early detection and treatment are the need of the hour. A strong primary healthcare system with sound regulatory framework would ensure that India's healthcare system is progressing and caters to the need of the people. Now, coming to some of the questions for those who are interested in this field of law, the medical and healthcare laws are the most ignored area in law school, and despite the plethora of legislation that come within the ambit of it, the students are usually throughout their law school are alien to them. So for them, could you just tell us various concomitant that this practice area encompasses?
Yes, as you rightly said, that this is the most ignored section of law. Even we did not study in our curriculum with respect to the medical and the healthcare laws of the country. The various concomitants of this area of practice will include, firstly, the laws which are governing the qualification and the practice and the conduct of the medical professional, which is the MCI Act, the Dentist Act, the Pharmacy Act, the AICTE rules, the paramedical and the physiotherapy rules, the medical degree act. So these are the acts basically which guide the practice of the conduct of these professionals which are involved in the medical sector, the Nurses Council Act, and all these places. Second is with respect to the laws which are governing the business aspect. For example, the Clinical Registration Act, the Clinical Establishment Act. Then come the contracts. Then come the all the IP law, the patents, and the copyright, which are related with the business aspect of the healthcare industry. Because IT Act, all these acts. So we have to understand these acts with respect to and relation to the healthcare industry now. Next could be with respect to the drugs and the medical devices, the drugs and the cosmetics act. Then come the NDPS Act, which is the major criminal act with respect to the narcotic and the psychotropic substances. Drugs and magic remedies act, where some kind of the black magic is done, so they come under this. So we have to identify all these laws, the basic laws, for example, the IP, the Patents Act, the copyrights, the Contract Act, आईटी एक्ट के अंदर भी बहुत सारे सब कंपोनेंट्स आ जाएंगे उसके, द मेडिकल टीवी उनके जो गाइडलाइंस होते हैं where they are projecting their medical services through the cable TV network. All these kind of things will encompass into the medical healthcare sector, as we are digitalizing our healthcare landscape now.
True, very true. So, could you tell us some interesting experiences that you came across working in the healthcare sector, the challenges that you face every day while practicing?
We do come across various challenges while working in the healthcare sector because it's an interesting and a new area of law. And I think these specialized areas of law like energy, healthcare, solar power, and all that, these require specialized knowledge of the sector industry as well. Because it is a very specialized sector in terms of where there are various stakeholders which are involved. So for us, before delving into this sector, we've been working in the sector for quite a while now. Before delving into the sector, it was very important for us to know who and what are the stakeholders which are involved and what are the respective duties and responsibilities under this particular law. So we had gone through provisions of the various act, and interestingly, we had filed a case before the High Court here, in which we had challenged the appointment of the drug controller of the state, because we came to know that he does not possess the relevant qualifications which are required to be appointed as a drug controller, which is shocking. Since this matter came to a light, we are now thinking, and we have already filed a public interest litigation. And let's see how does the court intervene and in what effect does it intervene. So this was very shocking because I think one of the highest posts is being occupied by a drug control in the state, and that person itself is not qualified. Secondly, one other experience that we came across while working in this sector was with regard to the licenses and the permission which are required. I think most of the work at state level is being taken up by brokers, or every sector has brokers. Even this sector has brokers, and there are certain responsibilities which are given to the department to overview the entire sector, to check the functioning of the key stakeholders. But that is not being done. That is being sidelined totally to give undue and unfair advantage to these brokers. Also, the impact of the duties of stockist. Now, I came across various cases by the Competition Commission of India. I think one was of Madhya Pradesh, and one was of another state, wherein the association had approached the Competition Commission of India. The federation had approached the Competition Commission of India against the association with regard to the duty of the stockists, because as we all know, there are stockists in the sector who stock a particular product or a particular device, and they make sure that only that device or a product is distributed in the market, which is very unfair, I would say. Also, the pharmacists, they have tie-ups with several practitioners and doctors, and only they are assigned to give medicines to a particular patient by that doctor. So all these, all these mafias are operating in this sector, which is very shocking, because I think the primary purpose of the government, the primary aim of the government is to regulate this sector, because this sector concerns the health of the people, which is of prime importance. Now, we see such stakeholders which are already there in the market and which are not being penalized. So, as lawyers, as legal practitioners, it is our pristine duty to make sure that they comply with the law. So I think Neha will also give you now some insights on what interesting experience she had while working in the sector.
As commoners, we always face the problems of some things we see in this healthcare industry and in the hospital sector. For example, uh, when I was small, or I wasn't very small, but I was in college, so I was buying some medicine outside a hospital. So they were, when I went through my own prescription, I took somebody's online prescription and went to the hospital, and I went to the hospital pharmacy. So they said, ma'am, we are selling just this drug for this disease. No, we are not selling the salts which are just a prescription you have got from the some doctor. So I said, why don't you keep that? Matlab, it's a general drug. Matlab, you should keep that. Hospitals are required to keep these kind of medicines. So they themselves told us, ma'am, we are required to keep the stocks of only those medicines which doctors are getting in their samples from the big corporate pharma companies. So I was like shocked to see that whatever we hear, these doctors, they have to, doctors have some samples which are being sold to them from some big pharma companies. They, those doctors are selling only those medicines in their own hospital pharmacy. So this is very true. So I realized this when I was buying some drugs for myself, that why this is not available there, particularly why this is not available. Some drugs are particularly available in a state, some drugs are not particularly available in a state. So all this is being regulated by some, actually the mafia, which is telling us that the whole industry, every industry is being some industry is always hiding behind this medical industry also, which is controlling the prices, which is controlling what medicines are to be sold in the market, what drugs are to be secured for only some high profile section of the population. This is not done. This is not the justice. So what we have to come upfront, what the legal professionals who want to practice in this medical field, what they have to do is they have to ensure that these kind of practices are not happening in the market. These are anti-competitive practices. These are anti-public policy practices which are happening in this industry and which should be stopped. So your last question is that what to advise to someone who is inclined in this medical practice or who is inclined in this sort of practices, to identify these problems, identify the problems which are in the digital landscape of the healthcare sector, identify the problems which are in the pricing policies of the drugs and the medical devices. These are the major concerns, new concerns which are coming up with the market, and nobody is present there as of now to look into them. There would be plethora of legislation or litigation would be coming up in the future due to all these problems and due to all of these issues, and they would go to the different tribunals. For example, the Competition Commission of India deals with the issue of the pricing policy of the medicine, but hardly in a year, just 2 or 3 medicines come up, which the people, with these organizations, these NGOs bring into forth and bring them into the picture, that these prices are being regulated by some corporates. These prices are not being regulated according to the demand and supply in the market. So the new professionals, the new people have to identify these problems and bring them into the limelight now.
Yeah, adding on to what Neha said, and the answering your last question, which is the advice you'd like to give to someone who's interested in the sector. I think first would be I would answer this question in 3 parts. First would be to identify the problems which are there in the sector from each stakeholder's perspective, be it a seller, be it a manufacturer, be it an importer, be it a patient, and be it a doctor. So these all are the key stakeholders which are there in the sector. So I think you should identify the problems that each stakeholder faces, and what are the reasons for that problem. Supposing a doctor is facing certain problems in getting his in getting conducting sessions or in getting recognized. So the problem lies with the accreditation council, with the appropriate disciplinary authority. The patient is having problems to identify the correct doctor, to identify who is the most trustworthy doctor. So that is because there is not transparent and free information available on the web, or there is no good portal which the government provides, which provides particular kind of specialized. That is very important. Especially one problem which the manufacturers now face is that they're not aware as to what is the current law scenario part of it, and what are the safety precautions, safeguards that they're supposed to take before entering into a clinical trial. So for that, they engage a lawyer. But again, even a lawyer has to talk from an industry perspective. And to talk from an industry perspective, you need to have again a research scientist in the picture. So I think the key stakeholder participation is very important, and it has to be a participative way to resolve issues. The medical sector has huge potential in India. Even the people who want to practice medical law, they have huge opportunity, because this sector more or less now has become more transparent, especially with the advent of the MDR 2017 and the MDR amendment of 2020 and the government policy on the same. So I think it's a good area of practice where students should focus upon keeping themselves updated with the ongoing in the medical sector. And I think with sufficient knowledge, with sufficient awareness, they can also develop some kind of special expertise in each of these sectors, be it drugs or be it medical devices, or be it telemedicine or e-pharmacy. So I think that needs to be done. Yes.
So yes, there are some distressing practices in the one of the most noble industry that we are having, that you just mentioned, and this practice is an amalgamation of almost all the practice areas, be it competition or data privacy, and it has huge potential, and it is surely one of the emerging sector which would give out opportunities to the new upcoming lawyers. So all those who are interested can check. So my last question to you would be, what would be the one message to the readers, be it law students or advocates, anything that would like
I
to.
think readers just need to make sure that they read more about the sector, and they listen to more webinars like this in the future, which are which are nicely organized by the organizer. And they also need to make sure that they take keen interest also, because as a lawyer, talking from a legal perspective, we gain interest primarily in the medical sector because it affected us directly. It was one sector where we felt there is a huge vacuum of good practitioners, of good lawyers. It is one sector like energy and like I think housing, which are essential. Healthcare is a thing which is essential, which everyone adopts, which everyone takes. And we often see that doctors prescribe medicines which are not really required, and there are pharmacists who give you medicines, and there are devices which lack the same amount of efficacy. Now, why all this is happening is because of lack of knowledge with the consumer or the patient. So I think the consumer or the patient should possess basic knowledge so as to make sure that they are not befooled. Having said that, I think Neha, would you like to add on to this?
The basic advice and the most precise advice for the lawyers who wants to practice here is that be aware of what laws are applicable into the healthcare sector, what laws can be applied to where, what are the tribunals, what are the places of justice where we can go, whether we can go to consumer courts, where we can go to the competition court, the competition commission, where can we go to to have the remedy of a particular problem, and be aware of the laws. Firstly, that we have to be aware of the laws and the problems which are persisting in the industry. There are many problems in persisting in the industry, and definitely there's a duty of the lawyers and the interest of the lawyers which should fall into the place together to identify those. This is the advice, that be aware.
Thank you so much, sir and ma'am. That brings us to the end of this interview. Thank you for accepting our invitation and giving your time towards this conversation. It was great having you with us. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Shreya.
you, Shreya.
Very well organized.
Thank you, sir.